You're going to break down and die. Your house is going to always have a leak in the roof. Your car is always going to break down. Your job you'll eventually retire from. Why emphasize the things that seem so unimportant? It's not saying that those things aren't unimportant, but when we tend to focus on God, it makes everything else look so little, so small, so insignificant. And it says, why shouldn't I focus on God? Because God can take my life at any time. You know, I could be walking up right here, right now. The book of James makes known, guess what? You can't determine your life. I could be walking right here, and I could get struck dead by God right now. I mean, how am I living my life? Is it centered around God? I'm glad God didn't illustrate that point by killing me right now. But one of the things that I think about is, you know what? Why don't I emphasize what is most important? One of the things about focus and priorities is this concept that Success Magazine emphasized. They said, you know what? Those who are truly successful are those that have a plan. Those who know what they need to accomplish, and then out of what they accomplish, they prioritize. These are the things that are most important that I need to accomplish. And then they start with the first things, the most important things. But oftentimes, people don't have a plan. People are living life aimlessly, and so they're just running off and living life hopeless because they're not accomplishing anything. And they're not being successful, and they're not putting the first things first. But I think, what if we started having our life and we started prioritizing? What things would be at the top? Because oftentimes it would be, you know what, it's my marriage, it's my job, it's my kids, it's things, you know, those are all important things. But the most important thing is God Himself. Prioritizing Him. You see, one of the things that we're learning more and more is that we're becoming a more stressed culture. I mean, anyone here feel stressed? Even right now? Things in their life you're just thinking, oh, I'm stressed out about, I don't know what I'm going to do after church. I know you're all stressed. Well, a professor for the University of Washington actually studied this. And he discovered that in 1967, that he discovered 43 things that were common attributes that caused Americans to be stressful. 43 things that make people they're common. Every day, every person pretty much has these kind of stresses. Well, he was completing his study, in this long study, and in 2006, he discovered that Americans now have about 56 common things that cause them to be stressed out, emphasizing that we have become a more stressed culture. And you know what? We're seeing more and more of our culture being less and less focused on God, and that doesn't surprise me. Because the more things that are causing people to worry, the more things people are thinking about other than God. And I think, you know what? Stress is something that really causes us to be weighted down. It's something that God doesn't want us to be weighted down on. One of the things that we realize is anxiety is something that brings us down. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 25 says, an anxious heart weighs a man down, but a kind word cheers him up. I don't know about you, but I don't like being stressed and worrisome. I don't like staying up at night and being struggling, saying, well, how is this going to happen? Where's this going to come from? And so forth. But one of the things that I understand is we have to trust God. If we focus on God and we realize His nature, His character, He's one who loves us so much. He cares about us. He cares about our needs. He's a God of peace. He's going to give me that peace if I'm willing to ask for it. I mean, there's always going to be things that cause us to be stressed. A study was done to discover what are some of the things that cause people to be the most stressed on. And as I read through this list, I want you to ask, are these things that tend to stress me out? Are these things that are causing me to be weighted down on? And here's some things that are considered some of the most stressful attributes in our life. Number 1, death of a loved one. Number 2, childhood traumas and experiences. Number 3, marriage, divorce, and family. Number 4, finances and debt. 5, unemployment. 6, poor health or weight. 7, personal relationships and the lack of acceptance from others. Number 8, work and school. Number 9, fear, uncertainty, and change. And number 10, attitudes, perceptions, and unrealistic expectations. Now, as reading through that list, how many of you say that those things are plaguing your life right now? Yeah. We look at that list and we say, you know what, those are the things that are overwhelming us. And here are 10 of the things that we're centering our lives around and focusing on instead of focusing on Jesus Christ. I mean, these things, when we focus on these things, guess what? We're not ever going to have peace. Because worrying about these things is just going to cause us to be anxious and stressed, rather than focusing on Jesus Christ who brings us peace. You see, one of the things that I think about is that we should actually be a people of peace. That we should actually not be so stressed out. And in fact, God doesn't want us to be anxious. Like I said, when we're anxious, we don't focus on Jesus. We can't focus on other people's needs because we're too focused on our own needs. We can't focus on God because we're worrying about the mortgage. We can't focus on this or that. And one of the things we have to understand is, you know what? All these things will be taken care of if you'll seek first God. And one of the things that also is, all these things, when put in the right perspective, are so small in comparison to the fact that Jesus died on the cross for us, washed our sins away, and that we're going to live with Him for eternity. I mean, these problems are only minuscule. Even if you had problems for 100 years, it's only 100 years in view of eternity. But God is taking care of all of eternity for you. And in fact, He made known He's actually going to also help you in this life as well. But oftentimes, we focus only on our problems rather than focusing on all the good things that God has done for us. One of the things that Christ teaches us is that we should not live lives of anxiety and stress. Now for me, that's a hard message because I struggle with this. And when I say that, I don't mean run away from your problems because that doesn't solve problems. I'm not saying don't pretend problems don't exist because that doesn't solve problems. I'm not saying live in a fantasy world where you think that there's no problems that exist because that doesn't solve anything as well. What I'm saying is realizing God's character, His love, His peace, His gentleness, and mercy towards you, that He's willing to provide and take care of you and help carry those burdens in your life so that you don't have to handle them all by yourself. I mean, I don't know about you, but I can't really imagine a life free from stress. Can you? Because, why is that? It's because we have created this lifestyle that teaches us that worry is common. Stress is the right way of living. That it's the norm. When in reality, Christ is talking about pulling us away from worldly thinking and living and saying, here's heavenly living and thinking. I want you to live this way. And heavenly living and thinking is not an anxious one, but it's one centered around in faith on God who cares about you and will take care of you. But can you imagine a life free from anxiety? I have a hard time with that, but in reality, that's actually the life that God commands us to have. And that's going to be seen. It's not going to happen necessarily overnight. It's a process where you're going to have to grow in it, because I'm still growing in this. But one of the things I ask is, how are we going to go about doing this? How is God going to help us to be at peace? Because how many of you would love to have peace in your life? Where you don't have to worry, where you don't have to be stressed, where you don't have to be anxious. I mean, isn't that one of the reasons why people want to make a lot of money? Is for peace and security, so they don't have to worry about things? But we don't find our faith in money. We find our faith in Jesus Christ. And so a lot of time when I mention this, people are saying, well, how can I have peace with God? I know God is a God of peace. I know that's His character. I know that's how He wants me to live. How can I actually live out that life? Well, I'm going to tell you 4 ways that we're going to look at, emphasize biblically. And the first one is prioritize the most important. I've already kind of mentioned that before, and mentioned how Success Magazine emphasized that those who prioritize those things and then they do the most important things, those are the ones that actually accomplish their goals. But a lot of times people don't accomplish because they don't have a plan, they don't prioritize, and a lot of times they emphasize and focus on the things that are not as important. You know, a lot of times we focus on things that aren't as important in our lives. And I found that principle to be true. You know what? One of the things that I think about is, what's the priority? The priority in my life is actually Jesus Christ. The priority is Jesus Christ Himself. A lot of times we'll prioritize other things. But even sometimes we can even do the noble thing and try to prioritize service to Christ. But even before service to Christ,